Hello, and welcome to the webinar, Starting Small, Using Automation to Scale Up Your Small Business. My name is Eric Wallace with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have a few administrative details to share with you, then we'll dig into our discussion. First, we'd like to thank Tipalti for their partnership with today's event. They've been wonderful thought leadership partners to Argyle, and they're committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. Thank you again to Tipalti. We appreciate you joining us today. We welcome you to stay connected during today's event. For those of you who are active tweeters, please follow us on Twitter at Argyle Exec Forum. I also wanted to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we've curated based on the feedback we've received over the years from our members. Argyle is very proud and protective of this policy, as it reflects our commitment to ensure the neutrality and overall value of the content presented at our events. We've worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the session today, and we appreciate our member support of this policy. For those of you who are seeking CPE credit today, you must answer at least 3 polling questions and remain on the session for its duration. Polls can be found under the Polls tab on the right-hand side of your console, right next to Chat. Afterwards, if you're eligible to receive credit, you will receive an email with a link to your certificates. If you have any questions about credits, please email cpe@argyleforum.com. Finally, and most importantly, please submit all questions that come up during today's event into the chat section of the interface. Before we start, I'd like to have our speaker introduce himself, then we'll begin our discussion. Jim, over to you.
Thanks, Eric. Welcome, everybody. My name is James Ward. I am the General Manager of Accounting and Finance here at Yamamoto FB Engineering in Louisville, Kentucky. I've been in accounting and finance in roles such as accounting manager, controller, and now general manager for all my year, always in manufacturing, starting back in 1996. So got a little bit of experience, and most recently in the last few years, automation. Ways to improve the accounting process, with the limited resources. As everybody, I imagine, is aware and experiencing, finding good qualified candidates these days is very difficult. So based upon that, automation is the way to go. And we will go through an example of what we did here at Yamamoto as far as with our automation process, pros and cons, and concerns that came up during that process as well.
Great, thank you. Let's begin with our first question. Let's start with defining what we mean when we talk about small and medium businesses, or SMBs.
Okay. Small or medium businesses are companies, as far as in my viewpoint, are companies that are making roughly about $60 million a year in revenue or less, have a small accounting department, administrative department, maybe 2 or 3 people. So there's pros and cons with that one. And when you are looking at automation, you got to look at your controls are being put into place and make sure that everything is covered without the possibility of risk. So you're looking at the smaller size companies, 1 location, maybe 2, very small in revenue, and a very small overall size as far as their department itself.
Great, thank you. Let's continue with, what are some finance automation concerns that are specific to SMBs, and what do they have to worry about that the bigger players don't? I'd also like to point out that we're going to do our first poll of the afternoon on the right-hand side of your screen. You just click on polls. Jim?
Okay, so some of the concerns that SMBs have to worry about is due to that small accounting department size is once that automation goes into place, are there any security risks that you might have to deal with? Could someone possibly hack into your system? Phishing expeditions. So you've got to make sure that you've got good IT controls in place so that once you do start that automation, you don't have to worry about erroneous data being sent through the portals. You don't have to worry about the possibility of hacking. And with SMBs, you might only have 1 IT person, where larger companies like a Ford or a GM have a building full of IT people looking at this. So having a good outside contractor is very important for this, or having a very good internal IT person as well.
Great, thank you. The next question is, where's the low-hanging fruit in automating finance tasks at SMBs, and what tasks lend themselves to automation?
Okay. So the low-hanging fruits that really you can automate, and it depends on your company itself. Here at Yamamoto, the first task that we automated was our AP process. It's a very low-hanging fruit, mostly data entry work is what we were doing. So by automating, that was definitely one of those easy tasks that we could do. But we had to look at the security concerns. We also had to look at the different software companies that were available that interface with our ERP system, and pros and cons, which ones were the best. Other financing tasks that could be automated would be your collection, your cash application or AR application, along with possibly interfacing with your banking financial partner to be able to gather all data on a daily basis and automatically import into your ERP system. And some of them will actually allow export of data to where your bank will run the checks for you instead of you having to run the checks yourself.
Great, thank you. The next question is, how can people in SMBs make the business case for increased automation with your company's leadership? And what are the elements of a persuasive business case for automation?
Okay, good question. So increase automation as far as being able to make the leadership team understand the reason for automation. The biggest one is basically there's not enough qualified applicants out there to do these easy remedial data entry tasks. In accounting, we're not making money, we're spending that money. So, yes, you can have a department of 5 people doing data entry work, but if they're not able to do it efficiently and effectively, automating it is the best way to go. You can cut down on your head count, reassign those people into better tasks inside of the company, make processing more efficient. And I'll kind of go over that a little bit here in a couple more questions as far as what we did here at YFB. But once I go through there, you'll be able to understand that you can almost eliminate a full department by automating it and using those people in other areas that actually make money for the company or help improve quality to where you have less defects and less overhead costs.
Great, thank you. The next question is related, and that's that many people are concerned that their jobs are going to be automated out of existence. What are some things that leaders can do to address these concerns?
Okay, so what we did here when we automated, and I'm going to kind of go in full detail here on this one now, so we'll be on this question for a little bit. So we started looking at, those low-hanging fruits, how can we improve the process? How can we make it easier? How can we automate? Because we had one person in AP, as far as our AP clerk, making about $40,000, $45,000 a year. That's just a cost that, did not make sense anymore. So what we did, I sat down and discussed with the young lady. I'm like, we're looking at, making an AP, some automation in our process, mainly in AP. So we're going to kind of be eliminating your position. But before you get concerned, we do have openings in these other areas. One was in inventory control, very important in a manufacturing company. And one was in HR as far as our benefit administrative side. Another very important area, you got to take care of your employees and make sure they have good benefits and everything's up and running timely. So I discussed it with the young lady. I told her, either one would be a very good position. I had already discussed it with the managers of those 2 departments and said, hey, why don't you go and talk to them, whichever one you want to do. You've got my full support. You've got my backing. They already know you. They just need to, kind of talk to you and make sure it would be a good fit. Which ultimately it was. So my AP clerk actually moved from the accounting department over to the HR department and ran the ran the benefits side as far as making sure all the employees filled out everything they needed for benefits on an annual renewal basis, 401ks, all that good stuff. And if there was any questions about their benefits or if they needed replacement cards, she handled all that one. So it was a positive. It was actually a move up in the company for her. And after being in HR for 3 years, she was given an opportunity to move on to another position with another company. but it broadened her perspective. So not only did she have accounting experience, but she also had HR experience. So it made her very marketable for other companies that were out there.
Great, thank you. And I would like to point out that our second poll is up in the poll section on the right-hand side of your screen. So our next question feeds into the previous question, and that is, what realistically will people do? And you already gave an example of this, but more examples would be helpful. What realistically will people do with the time that automation frees up?
So what people can do when there is automation, you can utilize those people in other positions at the company, as I mentioned previously. One thing that we are looking at doing here is some AR cash application automation after the first of the year. So my AR clerk, we're estimating we'll probably get about 16 hours a week of free time, so approximately two working days. We're actually going to have that young lady work out on the plant floor, maybe about 2 to 3 hours a day, doing process audits. Understanding the processes, looking at the processes, doing time studies, figuring out who's the best example for that process to use them as the training model to look for how we can make improvements. Yamamoto is in automotive manufacturing, and in automotive manufacturing, if you're not the main company, a Toyota or a Ford, you're going to get beat up every year for cost improvements. Well, you can only say no so many times before you don't get awarded new business. So by having people, having some time freed up by automation and putting them out there in those very critical areas, quality, process audits, process improvements, you can actually help make money for the company. So yes, you will be kind of, not doing your normal task every day, but you're going to be given tasks that will actually help make money for the company. So you can feel like, hey, I did this project or this project. Based on that, I'm helping the company make, $20,000 more a year, because that money can ultimately go back to helping the overall benefit package for employees to make it easier to try to find people, because that is the biggest hurdle out there, is finding qualified people, no matter if it's manufacturing or accounting or administrative. That is the biggest area.
That concern comes up a lot in our events. So I know you've talked about reassigning people to parallel duties in HR and on the manufacturing floor. But one thing that people talk about when we're automating finance is that'll free up people's time for more creative and higher value tasks within finance. So can you go into a little more detail about what these creative and higher value finance tasks look like in practice at an SMB?
Yeah, so, I'm going to still use Yamamoto as an example, but it could be used for almost all companies out there. But with having the manufacturing experience, what it will allow you to do for creating that higher value practice is you can do internally inside of the accounting department, or part of your process is be able to do a lot of analytical analysis on certain GL codes or certain expense codes, and dive in and go, why are these costs going up? What is causing this? We're ordering, 25% more of this cleaning product or this oil. And you can start looking at it and you can start asking those questions back to the managers as far as what is going on. It also gives you enough time to be able to start helping the CFO, VP, or general manager to do strategic planning. Not only can people help, but it frees up time off of the higher level people in the accounting department, that they're not having to worry about, making sure that AP's, inputted in correctly and timely every day, and POs are matched, and all that remedial data entry that's being done. It frees up their time as well, as far as on the administrative executive level side, to where you can sit there and do strategic planning. That by us automating AP, it actually freed me up about 8 hours a week, because I wasn't having to worry about everything getting matched and making sure people were getting their tasks done, and oh, if someone calls in sick, having to help out and moving people around. So without having as many people in my department now, it actually frees time up on my side where I can sit here and do strategic planning and analyze, cost drivers and raw material drivers and some of our sales drivers that we've got, to where I can say, okay, 4 months down the road, based upon what the current cost of raw material is and based upon what goes into that raw material that we utilize, where do we see these costs going? How can we make improvements? How we can get ahead of that cost curve now? So that's how one of the really big benefits. It gives everybody in the finance department extra time to be able to work on that higher level projects, those higher level tasks, to help the company make more money. Because at the end of the day, it's making sure that the shareholders and the owners and the board of directors are happy with the bottom line and the return on their investment.
I just want to remind the group that you're welcome to submit your questions into the chat section of the interface. So the next question is a question from the audience, and that is, are CPAs really assigned to the manufacturing floor? Reassigned, I mean.
Are CPAs themselves reassigned to the manufacturing floor? Directly, no. Indirectly, yes. It is very important for a CPA, a CMA, an executive level, a controller above. You need to be on that manufacturing floor. You need to understand that process. It's not like you're going to be there permanently, but spending a couple hours a day walking that floor and understanding the process and seeing something that doesn't make sense and asking those important questions, it makes you more part of that overall executive team, to where you're a strategic player, you're a strategic partner. You're not trying to take over the process. You're trying to help other managers understand, some weird stuff that's going on out there, that if they've been doing it for the last 2 to 3 years, it seems normal to them. But if you go out there on a floor and you're seeing product being moved back and forth, and look at how many times it's touched a day before it's actually utilized, and it's like, okay, why are we wasting 5 hours of fork truck time moving this product around? Is there not a place that we can store it? Can we make a storage closer to where it's needed? So it helps you be more of a strategic partner to the president, the VPs, and the company as a whole.
Great, thank you. The next question has to do with our finance data. And that is, how can we get our finance data out of its silos and into one source of truth? Even at small companies, things get categorized into all these different data wells, Yeah,
that's a good question. What we are doing here at Yamamoto right now is we've actually have started utilizing Power BI, Microsoft Power BI, Business Intelligent Dashboard. Our MRP ERP system that we use is QAD, and to get the data out of QAD, it's just not easy to do. So really only finance department is the one looking at the data, mining the data, and then sending it on to the different department heads. Now with Power BI, the department heads can get that data easily on themselves. So they feel part of the team. They feel part of that data team. They understand it. They understand that, based upon what the original forecasted data was for this month, and based upon where our current production is, here's what my costs should be based upon what we originally had estimated. Here's where my costs are, and then dive in and figure out, okay, which vendor's doing it, or which product from a vendor is causing that. My overall cost to be up. And then the next question that they are able to ask is, why? Why are my costs up? So it kind of gets them part of that, to where it's not, oh, finance is mining the data and giving me this data, and I've got a task that I've got to do now. They can actually see this data live. It's updated every hour. So every hour they can see the most up-to-date data based upon utilization of their materials and overhead costs, or overhead items, the receipt of them, where we're currently at with production. So it makes them kind of feel part of that decision team, to where, hey, I'm going to be able to look at this data and understand what's going on and get ahead of the curve, so that at the end of the month, my costs actually end up being under forecast, where I'm helping out the executives make sure we hit the budget for the month. Plus, we do not just say you can only look at one set of data. So my quality manager, he can look at the shipping costs. He can look at the quality costs. He can look at the cost of the die shop, where we make the dies for making our components. They're able to see each other's data, and by doing so, if they see something that looks weird, they go, hey, this doesn't make sense. Why are you ordering this much? They can ask the questions, and they can kind of challenge each other. So by doing so, it just makes it to where, everybody can ask questions. And when I say challenge, it's not, it's more of just, hey, I see that these costs are going up, hey, what's going on? Just so that if a manager's asking you that question, you can kind of be prepared before the executives might start seeing it and asking the question. So it's more of a camaraderie and a team instead of silos.
Mm-hmm. When you made that transition to Power BI, what did you know at the end of the transition that you'd wished you'd known in the beginning?
Oh, I wish I knew it was going to take as long as it did. When we started the project, everything was going along good, and it's a matter of, in QAD, and it is the same case with a lot of ERP, MRP software. There are a lot of databases, and the database names do not make sense. An example would be sales history. You would think it'd possibly say sales or invoice or AR or history. No, it didn't. It was the name of the table was DOCHI-CUS. And I'm like, who would ever have thought that that's where it would be? And so you've got to have experts to be able to do it, and people that are very smart with not only Power BI, but also with the software that you're doing the link with. I wish I had known that was going to be the biggest chunk of time to get us up and running, because I'm like, do a couple of database links, we can get some reports. We'll be able to get this done in 3 months. It's been 6 months, and we're still probably about halfway through the project. So if you look at automation, and this is not just with Microsoft Power BI, make sure you give yourself plenty of time for that one. Always shoot kind of conservative on your time and try to come in underneath, because you never know when someone on your team is going to be out sick for a week or 2 weeks. With COVID or the flu or pneumonia, whatever it is. So make sure you give yourself plenty of time for any hiccups that come along the way.
So the next question moves back into the topic of the finance data. How can you tell if your finance data is clean?
What we did is we analyzed all the data before we started the project. And make sure that internally, the process works inside of QAD or SAP or JD Edwards or Microsoft Dynamics, whatever the software is. Make sure that your processes work. Make sure that there's never any errors. Make sure that if you're linking a PO to an AP, that the PO gets cleared out. Just make sure that all the processes work correctly. And then after you get done doing the automation, and in this case, the AP automation, make sure that on a daily basis, you analyze the databases again, analyze the data, and say, okay, I just synced up 10 AP invoices with these POs. Make sure it posts. Make sure that it shows on the automation dashboard that it posted, so there's nothing hanging out. Make sure that the POs that were received against, make sure that they are showing as being received and zero amount still due, and just double check your work. And you need to probably double check for about 30 days or so. Then afterwards, make sure on a go forward basis, just randomly do some spot checks. And with us on our dashboard, we see when items are posted into QAD, we see the corresponding check number when it's paid, and there's a payment date. So After 30 days, if there's a payment date not showing, but it's showing posted, then you have to do some investigation. And you're always going to have to do audits on this. It's not like you can just sit there and never do audits. You do audits on the process when it's not automated. So you would have to still do some audits on the process, even once it's automated, but you won't have to do as much.
Is there any way to automate some of that spot checking? Like even to just make, automating reminders to do it? That sounds like an easy habit to lose.
Yeah, there are ways to be able to automate it, and it depends on how much additional processing you want it added to it. In our case, we just do it at the end of the month as part of our month-end close. We might have one invoice that gets hung out there for whatever the case is. It just did not fully post through, which is a possibility. If during the connection there was a power interruption, accordingly. But you could also have it automated to where it double checks all the information on a daily basis. It's a matter of how much you want to invest in that automation and is that additional cost of setting up those controls and those double checks worth the benefit. In our case, it would be about another $5,000–6,000 to set up the process, but we're only having one invoice that gets hung out there at a max per month. So the benefit for that would be about 3 years out. So, it's just a matter of, looking at the costs, and then if you have to, just set it up in your daily process, or your monthly closing process that you need to just run a report out of the automation dashboard just to be able to double check. And it's more of just getting into the habit. Once you get into the habit, you start doing it, it just becomes second nature.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, what are some ways that SMBs can use automation to detect errors and fraud?
Okay, a couple ways that you can detect errors and fraud, especially with what we use as far as our AP automation. It's got to be an exact match for it to post, and by that exact match, the company name on the invoice has to be the same as the company name on the PO. Quantity on the invoice has to be the quantity received against that PO. The dollar amount per line item has to be the exact amount that's in the PO. And then if there's any freight or sales tax, we have to get manager approval on it. What we also have inside of QAD, only certain people have access for setting up new vendors. And even then it has to be double proof. So to give you an idea, the controller, accounting manager here at Yamamoto can set up new vendors. But once they're set up in the system, you can't actually purchase from them until the GM or the vice president signs off on it. Then once it's signed off on it and applied inside of QAD, then and only then can new vendors actually be doing it. Same with if there's an invoice that comes in through our AP automation software, Easy Access, by the way, is what we use. If something shows up that there is no match inside of QAD, it won't allow anything to be posted until it's set up in QAD. And once again, it has to be, the process has to be followed. What we get of Easy Access is on a daily basis, we'll get a report that shows any weird transactions, invoice from a new vendor, not in the system. We'll get an email on that one. Or the original PO amount was $20, but the invoice comes in at $200. We'll get emails on those to where we have to double check them. And then you have to go back and you have to ask the purchasing manager, why did you order this and only tell everybody it was only $20, but it's now $200? Or why did you only order one, but they sent in 100? And sometimes it's a mistake on our part. Sometimes it's a mistake on the vendor. And you just have to look at those issues and address them and correct them. But with the way the links are set up, if it's not a 100% match, it's not going to go through. And on our AP side, anything for a purchase order or request for a purchase order under $300, the managers can do. From $3,000 to $5,000, it's our operational manager. And anything over $5,000, it has to go through VP approval. And ultimately, after all that, it comes through my set of eyes for double checking and sending it through. So there's multiple layers that it has to go through. So the possibility of a fraud is very minimized because of that. Most softwares have that type of layers and levels in it. That's one thing that no matter what, if when people do go with some sort of automation, make sure it's got a lot of controls and layers that any abnormal transaction has to go through the same amount of processes and approvals.
Next question is, this is a completely different subject. What are some ways that SMBs can manage automated finance systems without a dedicated IT team? They don't have that building full of people that Ford has.
Oh, that's so lucky if they did, because it would make everybody's life easier, because most of the time, if there's not an IT person, it's falling back on the accounting department. So what we have here at Yamamoto, we've got an outside IT support group that handles all of our day-to-day network, Microsoft, Adobe transactions or product. We also have a third-party support group with QAD. So what we actually, and that's on an annual maintenance contract, and it's just something we have as far as for any tech support on QAD side. So we actually set up a team from the QAD support side and our local network printer simple software support side. Got one or two people per each group. Did a Teams meeting, set everybody down, said, here's what we're looking at. You know, what do we need from the QAD side? What do we need from our support side? They started talking and got us up and running as far as on the AP automation. I think we were live within 20 days on the AP automation. And most AP automation companies have a tech support group as well. So we utilized all three groups. They did a good job of implementing, testing it out, and then in turn making sure that we threw a lot of test data at it. A lot of these connections is not something that a small company can do on their own. So definitely utilize experts out there. You know, experts with your MRP software, experts with that AP or the automation group, and whoever you use for your local IT support. And if the automation company does not have a good support group, stay away from them, because that will be something that you'll always utilize their support group if there's an error, if there's an issue, if the export file didn't go out because you're without power for 2 days because of the storm. Well, you don't want that data to think that it's exported out and get hung out in space. You got to make sure you can call them and say, hey, I need you to go in and export this data out again. Yes, I've verified none of those invoices are posted. Please re-export out the whole file. So utilize outside companies, but make sure that whoever you go with does have an actual technical support group.
Great. I wanted to go into a little more detail on the outside company, the outside IT support you're using. How did you choose the provider for that?
As far as our local network group, we actually had an IT specialist that had been with the company for about 10 years or so, that retired 2 years ago. And during that transition period, because he gave us about 30 days notice, me and him sat down and started interviewing all of the IT companies in the Louisville, Kentucky area. And, you know, kind of was like a job interview with them, and figured out, okay, these people are too small, this company's too small, or they're kind of too far away for what we're needing, and narrowed it down to 3 companies. From there, we kind of looked at, okay, give us some references, which other manufacturing companies are you giving support to? And we reached out to them. Utilize those companies that are out there in your market that are about the same size as you, or even larger or smaller, that utilize these outside IT support companies. Go, hey, what issues have you seen with this company, or have you ever heard of this company? Have you ever used them? Most executives, no other executives in business. Just ask them. Just say, hey, we're thinking about making a switch. Who do you all use? Who do you all utilize? That's usually the best way to find these companies is by word of mouth.
Great, thank you. The next question is, how can we evaluate and develop key performance indicators to keep track of our automation project? When you're scoping it out at the beginning, how do you set up your KPIs?
Okay, how we set up our KPIs is, like we do with any of our projects. What is the overall cost that we expect it to be at? And when's the deliverable? When will it be operational? And then from there, we set the go and we start going backwards to current day and say, okay, after 30 days, we want these databases to be linked, and we expect if we can estimate a cost, we expect the cost to be this much. Sometimes, as far as on the cost, it's just overall cost, and you just make sure that as the invoices are coming in and the percentage completion, it looks correct. Our main thing was how soon were we going to get that deliverable, and at the time of delivery, was it going to be operational to our satisfaction? We didn't want any delays, because any delays there is a cost to those delays, and it's usually it can be significant. So we figured out that we were going to try to go live with our AP automation in 90 days. From the date of signing that contract, we were going to be up and running, tested, fully automated, up in 90 days. We actually came in at about 75 days. So we came in 50 days underneath the project. And one thing that helped us with that is during that transition, my AP clerk, even though she was starting to be given some HR responsibilities, I talked to the HR manager and said, hey, I really need Stephanie to be, on the team still. And she was willing to let us have her for a little bit more time per day than estimated. So she was able to work with that AP automation group very closely. If you don't have that luxury, then, you being the project manager is going to have to do that and just make sure it comes in. And when I come up with those, personally, when I come up with dates and, due dates, I don't put much fluff in there, because I'm like, I don't want to say it's going to be 4 months and then I come in at 2. Well, that just makes it look like you don't know what you're doing as far as being able to get good estimates out there. So when I said 90 days, I thought it would really be at 90 days. We came in at 75. And it's because I was probably putting in about six hours a day on that one, and then still doing another 6+ hours worth of work afterwards. So it was like I was going through audit time as far as putting those hours in. But if you put the hours in up front and get it running operationally correct, then the benefit afterwards is so much nicer. It took a 40-hour work week, and it dropped it down to, I think we're looking at it, worst case, 8 hours a week, best case, 2 hours. And that 2 hours can be spread out amongst the rest of your, or 2 to 8 hours can be spread out amongst the rest of your accounting department, to where it just makes everything run better. You can usually be able to take advantage of cash payment discounts. So that was one of the afterwards KPI, was making sure that we were able to take advantage of all discounts more timely. Because it was notifying us of PO receipts on POs that were not done correctly, or pricing errors. So we were able to stay on top of it more efficiently.
Great. Next question is something we've touched on a little bit earlier. What can we do to mitigate the disruption caused by high employee turnover on our finance team?
All you can do on that one, as far as in case you are seeing a lot of high employee turnover on your finance team, make sure that the processes are documented very, very thoroughly. How we document all of our how myself and my team document our process, we do screenshots. So we've got a book that's probably about 14 pages or so thick for how the AP automation works, for service invoices, PO invoices, POs or invoices with tax or freight that's not on the original PO, how to do that one, how to send it off for approval. Freight or service invoices, no PO, how to send them off for approval. Once the $300 purchasing manager signs off on it, if it's over 300, how the system will move that over to the inbox of the operational manager. So very easy to understand processes as far as documentation on those processes. There's nothing wrong with picture books. That's how we all learned, back in kindergarten was picture books. So, keep it as simple as possible so anyone can pick up a book, be it the AR clerk, just a regular accounting clerk, someone in purchasing, someone that, is just coming in to help you out, just because you're behind for whatever the reason is, or someone from outside a temp. Is the way you can give them a book that shows the process and anyone can follow along. It's amazing. I've had to show it to our parent company from some of the board of directors have wanted to see it. And it's from Japan. They're from Japan. They speak very little English, but by having that very simple to follow process, even they were able to understand it and pick up on it. So the easier it is to understand, the easier it is for everybody to utilize, and at the end of the day, make the process even better.
Yeah, there's no shame in learning stuff from a picture book, especially in a multinational company.
Yeah, there is nothing wrong with that one for a multinational company, or even for people, that are, more older and set in their ways. I'm not trying to say that us older generation can't learn, but I remember the days of just old rotary dial telephones, and if we tell the newer generation that one, they go, cell phones? And it's like, no, we actually had desk phones. So
pretty weird. The next question is, how can we keep our finance data safe from ransomware attack? And I'd like to point out that our third poll is in the poll section on the right-hand side of your screen.
Okay, I'm going to look at these answers real quick. Have you been hit? It's kind of better than I thought. So yeah, no is leading by leaps and bounds there. So for anyone that has been hit by ransomware, you know the dangers that are out there. For anyone that has not, the easiest way to be able to keep your data safe is when you're implementing and looking at going with the automation. Look at this. Look at where that data is going to be stored. Most likely, it's going to be in the cloud. Look at the servers that they're utilizing. Look at their security parameters. Look at how that data is being communicated between your MRP, ERP software, and the automation software, because more than likely it's going to be on two separate platforms. How's that data, interchanged between those two platforms? What type of security protocols are in there? Is there MFA that has to be done, by the software to be able to communicate? What we do, because our QAD software is actually here based at the headquarters, we don't have it in the cloud, just because if we have internet disruption or telephone disruption or whatever the case is, it will greatly impact our processing and our manufacturing ability and our shipping ability. So we actually have QAD on servers here internally at Yamamoto. So what we've got is we've got multi-layer sonic walls and security protection to where it's looking, where is that data coming from? So if someone tries to get in there and do a phishing expedition or do ransomware and try to piggyback or try to make their virus look like it's coming from the automation company, it's looking at that IP address, and then it's also looking at how large of a file is normally sent over. When does that file normally get sent over? And if it's not in that set parameter time frame, it gets flagged, and the communication line will get shut down. So it's understanding the sophistication on automation company side, as far as what type of security parameters they've got in place. Have they ever been hacked? Has there ever been an issue with erroneous data being sent over because of a ransom attack? Making sure you understand that. And then make sure that your own SONOC wall and security parameters are very up to date and tight, and you've got multiple testing and phishing expeditions that your own company or IT provider is doing to just make sure that you're as stable and secure as possible.
Great, thank you. The next question is there any way we can automate some of the process for our 5-year plan?
Yeah, so this will go back to Microsoft Power BI. It pulls all of our current data in to where it helps with forecasting out what we think our overhead costs will be for the next year. From there, we still use Excel databases kind of for some of the data to look at, well, here's what the sales volume we think are going to be for our different product line. Any new product lines that are going to be coming in that's not part of QAD. So we've got kind of a special database. But after that, with Microsoft Power BI, with the way we have it set up, we can go in there on that 5-year plan and say, for 2023, we think that we're going to have a 5% inflation, 24, let's say 5% also, 25, 0, 26, -5 accordingly. What it's going to do is going to look at what our current rate, that's one example of, or one part of it. Then we can put in improvements on our SPM or product per minute, improvement on other areas inside the plant, quality maybe. We can forecast, we can put pay raises in there as far as a percentage. What we think our health insurance is going to do, workers' comp insurance, what are those costs going to be? So we've got it's still in Excel, but it's just a little table where we just key it in for years 1 through 5. Here's what we think it's going to do. Power BI looks at that data, looks at the current data, and forecasts out what we think it's going to do. Then it also looks at historically, for 2022, how close were we on our sales forecast. So if we originally said, we're going to sell 60 million pieces this year, but we're only running at 50 million pieces, then it's going to look and it's going to adjust and go, okay, we understand you're saying 70 million in 23. Okay, that's option 1. Option 2, we're going to say we're going to take 10% of that, then another 10% for option 3. And then option 4, kind of getting it down to wherever you're currently running at. So with Microsoft Power BI, that can be as sophisticated as you're willing to put the time and effort in as far as putting those table links in there. And once the links are set up for going back to your MRP, ERP software, then afterwards, once you've got the template, it's just a matter of just updating a few parameters, and you can get multiple scenarios for multiple years based upon current data and based upon some additional parameters that you can key in as far as what you think your sales volume might be on a go-forward basis on some projects and any newer projects that are coming along.
Great, thank you. We'd like to change the channel a little bit and open up the webinar for Q&A from the audience. So I encourage attendees to submit your questions using the chat feature. So why don't we jump in and address some of the questions that have been submitted so far. The first one is, what's the biggest mistake you've seen SMBs make in automating key finance functions, and how did they get past it?
Probably the biggest mistake I've seen, and this is talking with other financial professionals out there that have heard or have experienced it, is they try to rush and do too much too quickly, and they're not prepared for it. They look at it, by doing so, I can save $200,000 this year. Let's get it done. And then they rush into it without doing their due diligence and making sure they fully understand what it's going to take. This isn't just a matter of, installing some software and turning the light switch on. You've got to do some programming, some testing, plan for something weird to happen. before we went with Easy Access, we had actually tried another software company out there. And what they had promised us is not what the product was going to look like. So be willing to just say, hey, this is not working. We got to take a step back. We got to redo the process, and give yourself that capability and give yourself that time. Because if not, if you try to get it all done all at the same time, it'll become a bigger headache, and you run a risk of security concerns, fraud, and hacking.
Great, thank you. The next question is, we are struggling to automate some of our finance functions on an extremely limited budget. Do you have any advice for us?
With that one, hopefully they're still around, because they might have a follow-up question after this. Ask your MRP, ERP specialist for what they recommend based upon the size, based upon what you're looking for. Then contact those companies, those automation companies. Ask your banker. They're good people to, that have experience with some automation. They might be able to help you with that one. Ask your audit accounting firm that most companies are using for their annual audit and possibly tax preparation. They've got experience with that one. Utilize those outside your company support staff that you have, auditors, bankers, personal friends, other executives or other professional people with other companies. Ask around, ask them what's going on, ask them what they utilize. With QAD, there's actually a support group for QAD members. So we belong to a user group here in the Midwest. So we asked around through there too. Just utilize all possibilities. LinkedIn's another good example. Use LinkedIn. Ask your contacts on LinkedIn. No, don't be afraid to ask the questions. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Because if you do ask for help, it will actually work out pretty well.
Great,
and hopefully that answered the questions, but if they got any other questions, just follow up.
Great, thank you. The next question is, are there any exciting new finance automation solutions that are specifically geared for SMBs that are coming online soon?
I have not seen any, new and exciting. There's always new AP automation, AR automation, cash receipt automation that's out there. But as far as a new and exciting third-party software that's coming along, I have not heard of anything. With COVID, for the last few years, that kind of put a damper on a lot of new technology coming out for automation. I know there's a lot of stuff that's, focusing on Excel and items like that. But as far as true automation, no, there's not a new software, new company that's coming along that's going to, totally revolutionize the automation industry. I do know that some of your larger accounting and MRP software, they're looking at, they've kind of, had been asleep at the wheel, so to speak. A lot of them are looking at this type of automation, and they're starting to buy some of these smaller companies to bring that automation in-house towards an overall package. So if that continues to happen, there might be some improvements there. But with the groups I belong to, I have not seen anything new on the horizon.
Great, thank you. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you, Jim, for an amazing discussion, and thank you everyone in the audience for joining us today for this excellent webinar. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.